So welcome back for the week 5 update. Week 5 is for us is primarily the end part of October and into the first few days of November. I think today is November 5th. I hunted this morning. I saw a pretty good buck, but we've been seeing some pretty good movement, some pretty good buck activity. I passed up this buck called Worm. He's a hell of a buck. I passed up what I thought was Pickett a month ago. Now I'm calling him Joe. Big mainframe 12. I had him right underneath my stand. My good friend Anthony's in camp, and he's been hunting, seeing some deer pretty much. I don't want to say nonstop, but we're seeing deer pretty much every sit. It's been pretty good hunting, and this end of October, early November time frame is always good. Mike from Wisconsin got a hell of a nice 10-pointer on the cabin farm. So it's been a pretty hectic last 7 days. So we'll see what kind of video editing I can do to show you some highlights. So stick with me. We'll watch the video highlights from week 5, and then we'll come back and I'll tell you what Amy and I plan on doing from like the November 5th time frame until November 12th. I'll tell you what our game plan is in the next 7 days.
So this is October 30th. We're starting this video out. This is typical for us to have to cross these cow pasture fences, so I just wanted to include a clip in here to make sure I would talk about it. A lot of our access, the best access we have is through cow pasture. And that's because we can be quiet, and deer typically aren't in these cow pastures. The cows are making noise, so this works out really good for us. So I did a little bit of footage filming here, just to kind of point out how important this access is and how cow pastures really work good for us to sneak into our spots. On this evening, we're going to sit in that blind up ahead, and we're going to use a decoy. So I've already set this decoy out earlier in the day. I actually drove around with the Ranger and got close to this spot and set the decoy out. But I noticed on the way in today that the wind had kind of blown it over a little bit. But there's a standing corn here, cut corn. I shouldn't say standing corn. There's cut corn here. And then there's some standing corn that's going to actually act as our destination food plot for the late muzzleloader season. To the right, off screen right now. And there's a fence opening right here where the deer like to go through. Mock scrape right at the fence opening. So the goal here is both Amy and I and our daughter Lily have been seeing mature bucks come out on this cut corn pretty frequently. So the thought process is if we can just get one to come out on this cut corn, see the decoy and come in, Amy will get a shot tonight. So there again, I'm not going to film all of our entrance and exits, but I did want to film this one tonight a little bit just so you can see again our access through these cow pastures. And then I make these little ladders. I make these little treated ladders to cross these cattle fences so we don't rip our clothes and they're nice and quiet. But on this night we saw a bunch of deer, bunch of does and fawns, and what you know it, the only buck we saw was this little guy. So it's October 30th, and he's a little frisky, and he ends up chasing this doe by us with the decoy right down in front of us. I wanted to point this out. If you're hunting for does, or if there's a lot of does around, using a decoy can be not necessarily the best thing to do. So does typically don't like these buck decoys. That's been my experience. They'll come in, and a lot of times they'll snort and carry on, but hear that same doe eventually when she walked by that decoy, walk right through that fence opening.
That's a little long number, I think. What's that?
So here I am. This is probably one of my best downwind of bedding stands that I have. And it's windier than hell today. And that's why I could get into this spot. So I wanted to include some of this footage. Because some of my best stands are really tucked up close to bedding. And I just can't get in there, or I won't get in there. I won't even try unless it's windy out, which was today. On this day, I should say. So that's why I snuck into this downwind side of bedding. And when you know it, the actual picket shows up. So this is actual picket. This is the bucknut. So if you've been following along, you're thinking, how could I get this one confused with that 12-pointer that I filmed on the pond maybe a couple weeks ago? Well, this is picket right here for sure. We got one picture of him. I think it was on week 4 update. But I was just thinking he would get a lot bigger from last year. And this is basically what he was last year. Kind of a narrow, pretty massive 10-pointer. I think last year he was actually an 11-pointer. But this is him. Hands down, no doubt in my mind. And he's at about 15 yards right now. So I probably could shoot him if I was trying. But he's kind of downwind to me. And that wind being as windy as it was, it's kind of swirling in there and stuff. And he just don't like it. But I do the best I can to remain as scent free as I possibly can. I guess that's, for another video. So he knows something's up, but he can't quite, put his paw on it. So, but that was good to see him. He's a nice mature buck. I'm thinking he's probably 4 this year. Maybe 5 if he was 4 last year, obviously, but I'm thinking he was probably 3 last year, so he puts him at 4 this year. But it's good to see him. So this is the same night. I just got done seeing picket. And I heard some thrashing to my right. And here comes Joe. So this is the buck that I thought was picket here a few weeks ago. If you've been watching the videos by the pond. And he was thrashing in there for 5-10 minutes. And he's going to come out here in a little bit. But I got to edit these videos down because nobody's going to want to watch a 2-hour tape. But just a kind of little bit of a story. When I was 15 years old, 14 or 15 years old, I already had a giant 3-inch spike buck under my belt. And I remember sitting on the ground over some scrapes, and a 6-pointer had come in. And I was at full draw, and this 6-pointer was broadside, a lot like Joe is right here. And I could have shot him. And being 14 or 15 years old, that would have been the biggest buck that I had killed to that point. And I had no illusions. Back when I was 14 or 15 years old, I didn't know that there was a difference between a 1.5-year-old buck and a 4.5-year-old buck and all this stuff. I just thought there were big bucks and little bucks. So when I let that 6-pointer go when I was 14 years old, I did it because I didn't want my season to end. That's the only reason why I let that buck go. And back then, you didn't let 4-pointers and 5-pointers go because you might not even see another buck the entire archery season. That's kind of how I grew up on my grandpa's farm. So here comes Joe. And I could have killed him back there a little bit. He walks right underneath the stand. I mean, this is a hell of a buck. But I think he's 3 years old. And I'm just not going to shoot a buck like this. I want to hunt him for another season. I just want to see if I can hunt him again next year when he's 4 years old. And that's why I let him go. So it kind of reminds me of back when I was 14 years old and I passed up that 6-pointer. The reason why I pass up the majority of the bucks nowadays is just simply because I want to hunt them for another year. There's your shot right there. Quartering away, pull back. Meh. Right in through the boiler. But he was by me for almost 45 minutes. He walks off here. I had to cut the tape again. Can't put the full footage. Nice rub there. He's going to hammer. That's a hell of a 3-year-old if he is 3. And I'm not a perfect estimate hunter of age class. I think I do pretty good. But I'm going to say he's a 3-year-old just because his neck's not that big. And I hope like hell that Amy gets a chance at him this year or Lily gets a chance at him late muzzleloader. And if they don't, well, then I can hunt him next year. I don't get all bent out of shape if somebody shoots a buck that I pass. It doesn't bother me one bit. But here it is. You can tell it's getting a little bit darker now. He's probably been by me for a half an hour so far. And he's in these scrapes, but I just wanted to include this footage because you just don't have deer like this in that close a range for that long on a regular basis. So here I am again, close to bedding, as close as I can get to bedding anyways. And I see a lot of bucks this night. So this must be November 1st. Saw a lot of deer, a lot of little bucks, some chasing and grunting going on. But again, I edited most of that out. But a little bit more in the evening, I wanted to include this footage because this is another 2 or 3 year old buck. Beautiful 10-pointer. But I'm hunting this ditch cross. You see my camera right there? I got a camera right there, actually. You can probably see it on that tree. But I got a mock scrape that this deer's going to walk right through. And a bunch of ditch crossings in here. So this time of year, to me, that's the ticket, is your funnel type areas, ditch crossings, fence jumps, inside corners. That's what I'm going to key in on. Even downwind side of bedding, I'm going to also try and use something else to bring these deer in close. Mike Radecki from Wisconsin hammered a beautiful 10-pointer. I don't have any footage of this buck that I can share with you because Mike and Joel did all the tracking and got the deer and everything all by themselves over at the cabin farm. But I did want to share that that was one of the target bucks, one of the target 10-pointers over at the cabin farm. Mike did a good job. I wanted to include this footage just so you guys can see how I brush in my tree stands. I use these fake Christmas trees. And the reason why I like using fake Christmas trees is because they last forever. These have been up in that tree now for, I don't know, 5-6 years. And they last forever. That's why if you get your hands on some fake Christmas trees, it works really good. So now I'm sitting in a spot called Danger Zone. And this is a spot, ideally, I'm thinking is better, November 15th through the 20th. After all the other areas around kind of get some pressure. This is a little 15-acre woodlot. I'm thinking might hold a mature buck with a hot doe or something like that. And I saw 2 nice 2-year-old bucks in there this morning and a handful of does and fawns. This is the access. This is how I get in there. So that's the cow pasture. So I'm already crossed, but Lily and I made that little bridge out of a telephone pole in the summertime so I could access this spot. But I'm in here early because the only way I can get into this spot is with a pretty strong south or southwest wind. So went here, gave it a try, and I think I'm a little early, but the access was perfect. I didn't bump any deer going in, didn't bump any deer coming out because of that wind. And that bridge that Lily and I built worked out pretty good too. So I was kind of a trial run on that bridge. So here, the evening of November 2nd, and this buck we call Worm, here he is. He come in, you saw that ditch crossing, right? Well, that Worm used that ditch crossing. He ends up coming in right behind me. I didn't get him in that ditch crossing, so I filmed that little buck. So now I'm hunting downwind side of bedding in conjunction with some ditch crossings. And here comes this buck Worm. Now this is a big old mature buck, but again, I'm letting him go because I just don't want my season to end. And if Lily or Amy gets a shot at this buck, that'd be phenomenal. But I'm not passing this buck up because he's not big enough. He's plenty big. But I don't know if you caught the naming convention that Amy uses. The buck that I shot was Gummy, and this buck is Worm, Gummy Worm. That's her favorite snack in the tree stand. So that's kind of the naming convention she used on these 2 bucks. So this is the next evening. I hope I'm not losing track of the dates here. Maybe it's not the next evening. This might be November 4th in the evening. This is an observation sit, actually, so I don't really expect to have like a mature buck in range. But this 10-pointer came in. I think he's probably a 3-year-old. Beautiful buck, though. That's a nice 3-year-old. So this is the kind of bucks that Amy and I have been seeing this whole past week. So she probably saw just as many of these 2- and 3-year-old bucks that I shared. But she didn't have a mature buck in range that she wanted to kill. She would have killed Worm, I'm pretty sure, the other night. But I do a lot of observation sits if nothing else works. But this time of year, I get less and less. I get more and more away from observation sits. So this is November 5th morning hunt. Crows are going nuts. I'm able to get into this spot. Again, downwind side of bedding with a south wind. And I did see a few deer. Again, look at that, ditch crossing. I can't emphasize that enough, that even though I'm on downwind side of bedding, I'm using other structure to get the deer in range. So even though this isn't a shooter buck, this is the same trail, same setup where I saw Worm the other night. And let him go. I had to move the camera around the other side of the tree, and here he comes in, same trail. You can see that scrape where Worm was in the other night. He doesn't stop there, but so he comes in, hammers this cedar tree, kind of like locks his antlers in there. I never saw a buck rub like this before, but that's kind of cool. So November 5th, morning hunt. Things are looking good. Hope you enjoyed the video. I wish Amy could film some of the bucks she's been seeing, but she doesn't have a camera. Not yet, anyways.
So today's November 5th. We're going to go out tonight and hunt. So for the next 7 days, I've talked about this before. I'm going to assume that there's does and heat. I've already assumed there's does and heat. So I'm going to be hitting my hot spots, downwind side of bedding, fence crossings, ditch crossings, inside corners, funnels, timbered points. My top 7 pretty much spots. And this time of year in a morning sit, I'm going to do everything I can to do downwind side of bedding. And if I'm seeing deer, I'll sit there all day. In the evening this time of year, if I do move, I might go closer to food, but it'll be, a transition plot. But again, ditch crossing, inside corner, funnels, fence jumps. And now, not necessarily bed to feed pattern, but I'm doing more what I would say is bucks moving, bucks cruising. So this is the time of year when your funnels and your ditch crossings and stuff really start to ramp up. And I like to hunt this structure type stuff because I don't want to just see a deer, just see a shooter buck. I want them to be in range. So that's why I hunt this structure that I talk about. This is also the time of year when bucks are expanding their home range. So I don't want to say that this isn't, that the bucks that are expanding their home range, that this isn't part of their home range, but they've had, let's say late summer, early fall, they've had a kind of a bed to feed pattern that maybe is 100 or 200 acres, something like that. And they'll expand this 2, 3, 4 times now. We're in the peak of the rut. So don't be surprised if you've been watching a nice buck all fall and all of a sudden you don't hardly see him anymore because he's expanded his home range. Don't be surprised if you pick up a buck that you haven't seen all fall, never got pictures of, and all of a sudden you see him for the first time. So don't be discouraged if you haven't seen, let's say a shooter buck or a buck big enough that you wanted to kill yet, because likely something might come into your area as these bucks start to expand their home range and really start moving and putting on miles as we're nearing the peak of the rut. So for us, where we're located, year in and year out, November 15th is peak breeding. That's on this bell curve, that's when the majority of the does are getting bred. So by November 15th, half of the does in our area have already been bred, right? Because that's on the incoming side of that bell curve. But we still have does that got to get bred on the back side of that bell curve. But bucks are really going to be moving now. This is the time of year where they're going to move more and more frequent and more during daylight. So our strategy is just going to be to spend as much time as we possibly can in the woods. I see the forecast is calling for warmer temps this next week. I personally think that's great. The reason why is if it's a little bit warmer, I'm able to sit all day or as many hours as I possibly can, as opposed to if it's bitter cold and 40-mile-an-hour winds, I can't sit out in that kind of weather for 10, 12 hours. I just physically can't do it. So with a little bit warmer temps, 50, 60 degrees, it'll allow me to sit all day long, which is key this time of year, is putting your time in. The more time you spend in the field right now during peak movement for bucks, the better. So that'll be Amy and his strategy going forward, is just to spend as much time as we possibly can on stand here in the next 7 days. So hopefully you like the video, and check back with me in about a week, and we'll see where we're at. Thanks for watching.